Okay, so Tong just asked me a question about the difference with local property tax and registration tax. I'm gonna restart the conversation because I think it's great. But basically, there is an old school way of taxation and then the new school way of taxation when it comes to mobile homes in California and how they get taxed. So back then, all trailers and stuff were considered vehicles. So there's an old school taxation, which is considered more of a DMV style taxing, or like a car transaction taxing. When you buy the car, you pay a tax at the point of purchase, usually about like 8-9% of the KBB assessed value. So the same thing happens with mobile homes. On these older mobile homes, you'll have homes that are on an old school tax system. So that being said, the pro of that is it gets assessed on that KBB value. Even though the mobile home itself, you'd have to buy for like, let's say $300,000, the KBB value is actually like $30,000 or so, and then you pay a 3%. I think it's 3 to 9%. It does depend on where you're at and what that county will say the sales tax is, but you pay a one-time tax. So it's about like $3,000 to $6,000 at the point of sale. Now, why would someone want that? The key thing is if you're on that old taxation, you don't pay a real estate style tax, which is the new school tax, which is called LPT, which stands for local property tax. Local property tax is just very similar to real estate, where you pay about 1.1% of your real estate value every single year, right? So what does that mean? You have a $300,000 mobile home, you pay $3,000, a little more than $3,000 every single year. So that's just a permanent thing that you'll always have to pay continuously as long as you own that home. So it's very similar to real estate taxation and property tax. Now, if you're on the old school taxation, it's instead a one-time tax, and you basically are just paying registration fees to, like a car, keep up the registrations. And how much is that? Like $300 a year? Somewhere around $300 a year to do registration and keep it up with HCD. So you'll have these 1970s homes that are on the old school registration tax and still consider it as personal property, like a boat, like a car. So when you buy it, you do pay a heavier cost up front, but the pro is that you don't have to pay that long-term annual property tax. Does that make sense? Think of questions as I'm describing this to you, Tom. But basically, yeah, so a lot of people are looking for these homes that are on this registration tax because it is a pro. It's a benefit financially, and it's something that should be considered on every home, whether it's on local property tax or the registration tax. Now, where it gets confusing is not everyone's educated of what's the pro or what's the con, or not everyone has a priority of lowering their annual payment down. And then because sometimes during a transaction, people are not educated in which one's right or wrong, there's a lot of people that volunteer to go from the old registration tax into the new property tax, which is local property tax. So my hand's getting tired out here, so I'm going to switch. But basically, a lot of people that are handling a transaction at the point of sale, they're like, hey, you can pay $6,000 now, or if you want to volunteer for local property tax, you'll only pay about $3,000 a year. And some people have volunteered
turn right onto South Alameda Street.
Some people have volunteered their property into that LPT, that local property tax. And you'll see a lot of old homes that are still on the registration tax, have a very low, have no LPT, and then you also see the same old homes that is on the LPT, on the annual tax situation. So it's a good idea to keep an eye out or find out whether your home has been volunteered into the local property tax or not. Because some people assume that because it's an old 1976 home that you're on the registration tax, but it depends if it's grandfathered in on that, or if it's or if someone during the chain of ownership has volunteered into LPT. Do you have questions on that, Tom?
Yeah. So basically, let's say if there's a home that's like a 1975 home, and then it was sold for, let's say, $250K, then the sales tax will be based on the purchase price of the home that the buyers purchased the home for, and then that will be a one-time.
Not necessarily. So it gets a little more confusing. There's a way that they do it's not KBV. There's another software that they do, but it's very similar to Kelly Blue Book. They evaluate the home's worth nationally. So as you'd imagine, there's a 1976 double wide. Of course, it's valued like at $300,000 in San Jose. However, the national actual value of the home, not tied to a location, is actually closer to like $30,000, let's say, right? So instead, you're getting taxed on that value, not the actual purchase value.
Oh, so it's based kind of like a county or like a state appraisal kind of the home?
Kind of like, yeah, like a national appraisal style thing, but they don't tie into value where the home is. So
turn right onto South Central Avenue.
I don't want to get caught not knowing my math off the top of my head here, but let's say 9% of, actually, can you pull up a calculator?
Yeah.
9% of $30,000. 9% on the higher end, really, but
30,000.
yeah. So that's about $2,700, right? So a home could be $300,000, but assessed as a $30,000 home because of the actual just body itself, and you only pay the sales tax of about $3,000. So the key thing is knowing what the payment's going to look like. When you're buying a home, ask if it's on LPT or registration tax, because that in itself can mean $3,000 a year or $3,000 a one time.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I've been, like, there's a lot of buyers who like they purchase a home that's like before 1980 home, and they keep asking, why do I have to pay this sales tax? It's like $3,000, $6,000, and it's like what they don't understand is that it's actually different. And so thanks for explaining that, Franco, because now I have a better understanding.
Yeah.
What it's like.
So it's actually better. So you can tell them you can volunteer for local property tax, but if you do that, you're going to have to pay 1.1% of your value. And on the LPT,
head northwest on East 2nd Street.
On LPT, on local property tax, they actually do the sale value or a higher appraised value. So that 1.1%, let's do the math real quick, of 300,000. Actually, yeah, so that should be about 3,000 a year, right? So basically, you're going to be paying instead an annual tax.
Turn right toward Japanese Village
about
Plaza Mall.
$3,000 a year. So that being said, it's so important to know what that means. Don't get fooled into the truth is like a lot of people don't know about this. We're not tax experts. Buyers and sellers aren't tax experts. Escrow is not allowed to recommend what you should be. Oh, cool. Whoa. So they're not allowed to recommend which tax you should be taking because they don't want to have a risk in it. But the key is, if you are on registration tax, don't volunteer for local property tax. It's usually not the best case. I would only advise it if you're trying to save money on the short term. But in the long term, if you have the option to keep the registration tax, keep it. Now, that being said, anything that's a newer home, this isn't really relevant, because if you're a 1980 home or a 2024 home, you're automatically tapped into the local property taxation, which is the modern taxation of that. That's very similar to real estate taxation.
Turn left toward Japanese Village Plaza Mall.
Town. But anyways, hope that was valuable. Thanks for watching, y'all. Thanks for asking the question, Tom.
See you guys in the next video.
Later.